Hi, I'm Dan Conrad with Primaire Retractable Screen Doors, and this video is to demonstrate how to install a double French door. Okay, you'll need a power drill, a dead blow hammer, a tool to cut with, a snippers, a fine tooth file, a 3mm Allen wrench, a 1/16 inch drill bit, a 1/4 inch drill bit, and a 3/16 drill bit, and a tape measure. And if you're doing an 8-foot door, you'll need a step ladder. First thing to do when you approach a door to figure out how you're going to mount the doorway to it is just make sure everything looks square and plumb and as it should. If anything looks really out of whack, you're probably going to want to take extra measurements and have extra considerations as you're cutting and fitting the doorway. But this one looks pretty square. So the first thing we'll do is we'll take some parts from the doorway and determine where it's going to mount on the door frame. In this situation, we've got a ledge in front of the threshold. That's where we're going to want to mount the bottom track to. So the bottom track is going to be on that ledge. In the housing, we've got this nice little notch here that we're going to mount the housing into, and that'll determine where the bottom track comes across. And since that notch is all the way around the whole door frame, the other housing will be in the same notch on the other side. Now we know where we're going to measure from to measure our housings, right in here. Take our measurements. Now that we know where the housing is going to be fitted into, we measure the first side, 96.5. Now I always use the same tape measure because you get used to the 3 inches of the tape measure being an accurate last 3 inches of your measurement. And it is exactly the same, 96.5. Now I also want to measure the middle to make sure that there's no significant variances in the door threshold or the top of the doorway. And it dips down just like maybe a 1/16 of an inch, but that's no problem because the top track is deep enough to take up any variance. So I always take my dimensions and write them down so that when I get to my workbench, I don't have to go back and wonder how the door laid out. So the way I do it is my sketch is I do 2 lines that are eventually going to be where I put the dimensions for the top track, and 2 lines where I'm going to put the dimensions for the bottom track. So that's kind of my door layout. Now I can also make a notation of which side is going to be the active door and which side is going to be the non-active door, the fixed door. In this case, the handle is on the left-hand side, so this door is going to come across, click into place, and this door is going to come across and meet up with it. So this will be the one that they'll go in and out of more often. So another thing I want to note, and this is a standard door, but sometimes the handle's in different places, so I sometimes make a dimension of how high up the handle is from the floor. So I make sure that my handle is offset. Okay, so here we are back at the truck. We've got a double door kit in front of us. First thing we need to do is unwrap it. So it's safe to draw a blade across the middle here. Just being careful not to push into the door kits as you go. Take your spring kits out, your lock pins, set them aside. Put your spring kits aside, and your top and bottom tracks. Set all those aside, and now we're just left with our housings. Now before we can measure our housings, we have to make sure that we've got a clean edge to measure from. See, they come from the factory just rough on the end, so we want to cut a little bit off so that we've got a complete clean edge. So I'm going to do that on both of these. important to have a fine-tooth carbide tip blade to cut through these. And take your time pushing it through, nice and easy. So now we've got two clean ends that we're able to measure from. Both of our doors were 96.5 inches. So what you measure to is 3/4 inch less than that, because the caps that go on the ends are each 3/8 of an inch. So if we cut the housing 3/4 of an inch short, we'll be good to go. So it's 96.5 minus 3/4 gives us 95 3/4. If you have any doubts or gut checks, always measure twice, cut once. Okay, so now we're ready to do our final cut on the housings. When you're grabbing it, always make sure that you're grabbing the felt. See, it slides in there. Make sure that you're not moving it while you're getting it lined up to cut. I always lay the housings with the pull bars away from me. It just makes for consistency when you're assembling. So now I've got both of my housing assemblies ready to be laid out and drilled. First thing you do is pull the pull bars out. About 4 inches. And always know which one is the fixed side and which side is the active side. I always put the fixed side towards me for a couple of reasons: consistency, and also because I'm going to be doing more work on this one, so it's easier if it's close to me. So I got to know the fixed side. I know pulls from the right, so that means this is the bottom and that's the top. So I'm going to measure the handle. Bottom hole is 42 inches to the bottom hole, and 4 3/8 inches above that to the top hole. Now notice there's two grooves on the pull bar. The first groove is the groove for the handle holes. The groove closest to the magnet side is the groove for the lock knob. So what we do is from the top handle hole, or from the right handle hole in this configuration, we measure up about 2.5 inches. That's not a critical dimension, but we make our mark by the second groove. And then this one is a little more important. We go 7/16 back towards the handle to make our second notch for the spring hole. So this one's going to be for the lock knob hole to go through, and this is going to be a smaller hole that's going to be where the spring engages the pull bar. Now, if that's the bottom for the fixed side, that's going to be the bottom for the active side. So I'm going to measure up 42 inches for my bottom handle hole, and another 4 3/8 from that to my top handle hole. And those will be my holes for the handle for the active side. And now I'm ready to drill my holes. Okay, so the first thing I'm going to do, even though I'm going to be drilling 1/4 inch holes for the handle and for the lock knob, I'm going to do a starter hole to keep that big drill bit from wandering. And this is just for the ones that are going to be the 1/4 inch holes. And you can see the layout for this, if you like, on the setup instructions that are on the website. Okay, now I'm going to drill my 1/16 inch hole for the spring right on the groove. Try to deburr the inside a little bit like that, just by wiggling it around. I'm going to take my nice sharp 1/4 inch bit to drill my lock knob hole. Making sure it stays centered on that groove. And start it into the second side before you finish it up. Do a little deburr. I'm going to take my other 1/4 inch bit and drill for the handles. Elongate it a little bit, that'll give you a little wiggle room when you're lining up your handle bolt. The last thing I'm going to do before I clean up all the shavings is make sure that the lock knob hole is completely deburred inside, because any burrs in there might interfere with the lock cam once we get it installed. So I'm going to just kind of look in there. You kind of see what's going on, but I always kind of run it around just so there's no burrs in there that are going to catch. And I'm going to blow it off now. I always start by vacuuming the big pieces first so I don't blow as many shavings into the customer's driveway. When I switch to the blower side, get it all cleaned up. Now it's very important to blow out the insides of these because you don't want the shavings to be getting into the mechanisms. Now we're ready to assemble the parts. The first thing to do is take your spring kits and get them unpacked. You have end cap and a spring cap and a bag for all the parts you need at the workbench. So in here you've got your handles, then you've got a lock knob, a lock spring, and a lock cam. You have 4 shoes that will go into the pull bars, and your handle mounting bolts, and your logo. And the other one, you got your other end cap, your other spring cap, and all the parts you're going to need at the doorway to mount the door onto the door frame. I'll put those in my pocket to have ready when we're there. The first thing I do is put the handles on. You'll notice you've got 2 long bolts and 2 short bolts. The long bolts go on the active doorway because it has handles on both sides. The shorter bolts go on the locking doorway because it only has a handle on one side. So the first thing I'm going to do is take them apart. Take the female side, put it through the pull bar, and then take your 3mm wrench onto the male side, snap it in. With the handle, there's an open side and a closed side. The open side always goes towards the screen. So lift it up, get it lined up, and get one side started. Once it's started, don't tighten it all the way up because that gives you a little bit of wiggle room for your second one to get lined up. So put that in your hole, line it up. And this one now you can tighten all the way up. Tighten this one all the way up. Now take your other two, these are the longer two Chicago bolts, take them apart. Take the female end, mount them into the, push them into the handle. They usually stay pretty snug, which is nice. Again, the open side goes towards the screen, so I'm going to put the back side on like that. Now I've got that ready to go. Take one of these, snap it on, open side towards the screen, and get one side started. Line up your second one. Tighten it up. Tighten this one up. Now all the handles are mounted. Now we're ready to attach, put the locking mechanism in. So now grab your lock pins. These are the two aluminum pins that are going to engage with the top and bottom track. You'll see they've got little bends at the end. So the bends will interact with the lock cam inside the pull bar. So I'm going to take the first one and start by inserting the unbent end in, and just make sure it gets past the handle, and that's going to be the side, that side. So this can really only happen one way, but rather than fight it, just remember that the flat edge is always going to go in first, and the first pin is always going to be angle part up. So just get it in there, get it started like that. See, leave that hole exposed, the other hole exposed a little bit, because that's where the bent end of the second pin is going to go, and push it in. And we can push that all the way in until we see the square center of the cam come out in the hole here. Move it a couple times, make sure that it's moving freely. And turn it all the way clockwise, counterclockwise, and square, because that's where the lock knob is going to go into. So now we've got a lock knob with a screw in the end. Take the screw out, because that's going to be what holds it into the pull bar. And then take your lock spring and insert it into the hole. You see there's a little hole there that the spring goes into. Now you've got your lock knob shaft and your spring. The spring will go into the spring hole while you guide the square lock knob shaft into the cam. And just move it a couple times, make sure it moves freely. And take your screw and insert it from the back side. Now you'll notice that's a very small screw, and it's an aluminum screw, so you're not going to want to put much pressure on it when you tighten this up. So get it started and then just snug it up with your 3mm wrench. Once you feel it snug, just stop. And then make sure that it's moving freely. Your lock knob's installed. So now we're going to insert the shoes in the locking side door pull bar. So that what you do is there's the center hole is where the pin goes through, and then it slides into the end of the pull bar. Sometimes you got to tap it in a little bit until it's nice and seated into that cavity there, like that, and tap it in. Now the standard measurement is you want to measure 1/4 inch on the bottom and 5/16 on the top. That's how much you want protruding out. 5/16 on the top and 1/4 inch from the bottom of the shoe to the bottom. And once we got our marks, take our little snips and we'll cut right on the mark. So now that we've got the pins trimmed down, we're going to file the end. So I always cut it like this, because it's going to be moving in the track this way, so it kind of gives it a natural guide. But I'm still going to file it so that it's nice and smooth. File the front and the back a little bit so that it has a really smooth aluminum on aluminum surface. Okay. So now we have the end cap and the bushing. The bushing has little ears on it that go into the inside spline of the roll tube. So it goes like that. And then the end cap, these two pieces, the screen goes between them. Line up the pin with the bushing, and then we're going to line up the two tabs with the extrusion. Once you get it started, you just tap it in with the dead blow hammer. I will do the same one for the active side. Okay, so now we're going to put the spring sides on. The first thing you do is take all the screen up onto the roll so that you know you're starting with the same place on both doors when you put the tension on. Okay, so the end of the spring has a little spline piece on that goes to the internal spline of the roll tube, and we put 12 lines on it. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. Now as you're holding it with the tension on it, slide it in and make sure that the bushing engages with the roll tube. And line up the tabs with the housing. Get it started and pound it in. I'll do the same with the active side. (11, 12). Always make sure the bushing gets lined up with the roll tube. Screen goes between the two uprights. Once you get it started, tap it in. The very last thing we're going to do here at the bends, we're going to put the shoes in to the active side. Now they're ready to take to the doorway. Okay, now we're at the doorway. We're ready to mount the housings onto the door frame. First thing you do is take the parts bag that you got out of the spring kit while you're at the workbench and open it up. What you'll have in there is the bottom lock, the top lock, which we'll set aside. Then you've got the mounting clips that are going to be used to attach to the doorway and snap the housing assemblies onto them. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to show you how the mounting clips interact with the door. The clip is exactly the same width as the door, and the little L-shaped tab is going to snap into that groove just like that. So we'll mount that to the door and then the housing will snap onto it. So I'm going to take my mounting clip and split the door frame about 3 ways because you got 2 clips. Hold it up into that area where the back of the housing is going to be. And run a screw in there. And we'll do that 4 times. 2 on this side, 2 on the other side. can snap our doors into place. Just going to watch them as you go, make sure that they line up with the grooves, and snap them on. Put the grooves, snap them on. To measure for our top and bottom tracks, we're going to pull the screens out so we have an accurate measurement for each track piece. We're putting each screw in without tightening it all the way up, just to keep the housing from popping off the clips when we pull it out to take our measurements. Now, to take our measurements for our top and bottom tracks, what we need to do is pull the doors out and put them where we're going to want them. So, the key to that, always pull your fixed side out first, a little bit past the center, past this doorway, but not to the door. So kind of somewhere right in between there. Then pull the other one up to it, and look up you got it. Now take your bottom lock, slide it under the screen, and slip it up under there. Make sure that it's pushed up against the pin, because that's where it's going to settle in when you're using it. The pin will go into the hole in the track, into the lock, and then slide back against it. So you want to make sure the pin that is hidden in there is pushed up against the back side of the hole in the lock. And I'm going to do the same thing with the top one. Just going to slide it out, get it on there, and then push it against the pin like that. Now I can measure for my 2 top tracks and my 2 bottom tracks. I want to show you exactly what you're measuring to for your top and bottom tracks. The way it's going to be set up is you've got your end cap, and the bottom track is going to snap into it like that. So you're measuring to this inside surface right here, and then you're going to measure across to your lock piece, which goes in like this. So we're measuring to that surface right here, and those are the surfaces you're going to measure between in order to get the accurate dimension for your top and bottom tracks. So remember, I made the lines on my tape measure. Now I'm going to put a dimension on each one of those lines for each of the tracks. Now for the tracks, I'm measuring from the inside surface of the end cap to where the track's going to come to on the lock, which is 33 7/8. So 33 7/8 for that one. And now I'm going to do the same for this side. And that one is 31 7/8. Again, it's important to know exactly where the track is going to be so you take your measurement to the right spot. This one is a little bit more than 33 7/8, so I'm going to go 33 7/8 plus, which is cool. It's always nice if it's a little bit wider at the bottom. And this one is going to be 31 7/8 plus. Once we've got our measurements taken, we're going to put the door away, separate the magnets by pulling one, push one, and guide that back in without letting it go too high or too low. You want that to go back onto the roll the way it should. In this one, you want get your top lock, your bottom lock, and let that settle back into its housing. So now we're ready to go cut the top and bottom tracks. Okay, so now we're going to cut our top and bottom tracks. First thing to do is get them unwrapped. So I take my blade, you can run it in this groove here because that won't be seen. Cut your plastic and get them unwrapped. Now, it's important to know which track is which as you begin to get them ready to cut. So what I always do is I put the active side away from me and the fixed side towards me. Now, the way the tracks interact with the housing end caps is this little groove here goes onto the tongue onto the end cap. And that groove, the tongue, is always offset towards you. So as I'm looking at the door, that's towards me. So that's the way I want to lay it on the workbench. The bottom track is also towards me. The little groove is towards me. So I'm going to turn it upside down, but lay it on the workbench. And the same thing for the fixed side. So now that I've got them laid out and I know how they're going to be on the door, I'm going to go ahead and measure each one. The active side top track is 31 7/8. And the active side bottom track is 31 7/8 plus 1/16. That's just a hair bigger, 1/16 of an inch bigger. And then the top track for the fixed side is 33 7/8. And the fixed bottom track is 33 7/8 plus. Now I'm ready to cut. Okay, I've got all my trucks cut to size, and I'm going to drill my mounting holes with my 3/16 inch drill bit. Now I know that this is my active side, and this is the side closest to the housing as I'm looking at the door. So I'm going to put my hole a little bit closer or off center towards the center lock, because that will help stabilize it. And I'm drilling my hole in the track. You'll see on this flat surface here, I'm going to drill as close to this side as I can. That allows for the mounting screw to get in there at an angle. This one on the same side. Now since this is the fixed side, I'm going to do it on this side because that's the side that will be closest to the lock. Now it's all drilled and ready to go. I'm going to go ahead and blow it off. Now before we go back to the doorway, I'm going to crimp all the ends. You can see the felt can slide out the ends. I don't want it to do that, so I'm going to take and crimp, and that'll secure the felt into the track. Both sides, I'm going to do that on all four of these. Okay, now we're ready to go to the doorway. Now we're back at the doorway. We're ready to mount our top and bottom tracks. I'm going to start by mounting my bottom track. Remember, the fixed side was longer. The notches go towards me. And I'm going to have a lock piece in the center. Now this can only go in one way. It's directional, but it can only go in one way, so it'll be pretty obvious when you're looking at it. The first one, we're going to slide under the fixed side. And remember, you've got the pin under there. So you want to do is turn the knob so that you can get past the pin, and it slides right onto the tongue in the bottom. Now we do this side. Slide it right onto that tongue in the bottom. Lift it up and let it settle back down onto the lock pins. Then we've got two mounting holes. I always use the grooves in the door to make sure that I'm running straight across. Make sure you get it started. Bottom track's installed, and I'm going to do a final tightening on the bottom housing screws. So again, the longer one is the locking side. Mounting holes go away from you. Make sure we are over the pin onto the tongue, and then under that tongue, lower it down, get your tongue started and push it up onto it. Put your mounting screws in through the holes that you pre-drilled. And then do the final tightening on your housing screws. Okay, so to test your doorway after you're done installing it, always pull the lock side out first. Pull it across, it should click into place when it gets to the center lock. Wiggle it a little bit, make sure that those pins stay in, because if they don't, you might have an issue with the crown in the doorway or something. This feels good. It should wiggle about that much and stay in. Then you bring the active side out, up to it. You get your full length magnets. Looks good. Run it in and out a couple times. Make sure it's seating correctly. That's wonderful. Turn the knob a quarter turn. Pull this one out a couple times. Make sure it's working great. Perfect installation. The next step is we want to call the customer and explain to them how the door works. So the first thing I always do is tell them, when you're not using the doorway, leave it retracted. That way it stays clean out of the weather. You don't have any dirt. This pull bar seals up the housing, and it stays nice and clean. When you need the doorway, I always tell them, just like this door creates the latch for this door, this side creates the latch for that side. So you always pull this one across first, so it clicks into place. Then you got a full-length magnet, to create the latch, and there's your doorway. That's where they go, ooh, ah. So I have to explain to them that it's a strong magnet, so you can't just pull it loose. You could, but it'd be really hard. So to make it easier, you put your fingers in that one, push the other one away with your thumb, and you always have to explain to them, they think they're pushing it that way, but they're pushing it that way. So kind of walk them through that. Let that one release, then hold on to the handle because it'll take off. Turn it a quarter turn, and off it goes. Now I tell them that the main maintenance issue is going to be the bottom track. They need to make sure that it's cleaned out. If they haven't used it for a while, they can vacuum it out, make sure it's clean. And always use Lemon Pledge furniture polish as a lubricant. It's got paraffin in it. It doesn't come up in the fibers. It falls away. All you do is take it, spray it in the track like this, and spray the top like this. That's always good to do, to show them how you're doing that. And it's also good right away to have it lubricated so that the door starts out nice and smooth. And that's an installation for a double door.